She arrived at the Duke's wedding with a child, and the truth left him completely speechless. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining us from. And subscribe if you love romantic stories like this. Now, let's fall into this tale together. Rose Hayes shouldn't have come. Not to this place. Not on this day. Not with Samuel's small hand clutched in hers like a lifeline she wasn't sure would hold. But someone had wanted her here. Someone had sent an invitation that changed everything. The cream-colored envelope had arrived 6 days ago, slipped under her door in the modest boarding house where she and Samuel rented 2 rooms on the 3rd floor. No return address, no explanation. Just her name written in elegant script across the front. Miss Rose Hayes. Inside, a single card on expensive paper stock, the kind Rose couldn't afford even if she saved for months. You are invited to attend at St. Michael's Church, Hampshire, June 21st, 1888, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Bring the child. No signature, no context. Just those 4 words at the bottom that had made her blood run cold. Bring the child. Someone knew about Samuel. Rose had spent 3 sleepless nights staring at that card, turning it over in her hands, searching for clues that weren't there. The paper was thick, cream-colored, with a subtle texture that spoke of wealth. The printing was professional, the kind done by stationers who served only the upper classes, and that instruction, bring the child, was too specific to be coincidence. She'd considered ignoring it, burning it, pretending it never arrived. But curiosity warred with caution, and in the end, curiosity won. Or perhaps it was something deeper than curiosity, a mother's instinct that this mysterious summons was connected to the one question Samuel asked her at least once a week. Where's my father? So she'd taken what little money she had, bought train tickets to Hampshire, and sewn Samuel a new suit from fabric she could barely afford. Dark blue wool, tailored to fit his small frame. White shirt pressed until it gleamed. She'd combed his unruly blonde hair back with water that morning, though rebellious strands already escaped to fall across his forehead. He looked beautiful, perfect, every inch a gentleman's son, even if the world would never acknowledge him as such. Now standing at the iron gates of St. Michael's Church, Rose felt her resolve wavering. The church was larger than she'd expected, all grey stone and Gothic arches, with stained glass windows that caught the afternoon light and threw colours across the gravel path. Beyond it, visible through a gap in the ancient yew trees, she could see what had to be an estate. Massive, imposing, the kind of place where people like her only entered through the servant's door. "Mama," Samuel whispered, tugging her hand. "But are you sure we're supposed to be here?" Rose looked down at her son. At 5.5 years old, he was all angles and energy, his green gold eyes, eyes that weren't hers, bright with curiosity and a touch of nervousness. He'd been so good on the long train journey, sitting quietly with the wooden horse she'd carved him last Christmas, only asking a dozen questions per hour instead of his usual 100. "Someone invited us," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We have every right to be here." It was only half a lie. They had an invitation. Whether they had a right was another question entirely. They walked through the gates, Rose's worn boots crunching on the gravel, her dress, her best dress, dark green cotton with carefully mended lace at the collar, suddenly felt shabby against the backdrop of such obvious wealth. She'd thought it fine enough for church. She hadn't realized she was walking into whatever this was. As they approached the church doors, she heard it. Music, the swell of an organ playing something formal and stately, and voices, not singing, but the low murmur of many people gathered together. Rose's steps faltered. "Mama." Samuel looked up at her, sensing her hesitation. Before she could respond, the church doors opened. A couple emerged, laughing quietly, the woman adjusting an elaborate hat. They were dressed in finery, the man in a perfectly tailored morning coat, the woman in silk that probably cost more than Rose earned in a year. The woman's eyes swept over Rose and Samuel, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, confusion, a hint of disdain. "Are you lost?" the woman asked, her tone making it clear that Rose must be. "I was invited," Rose said, lifting her chin. The woman's eyebrows rose. "To the wedding?" "Wedding." The word hit Rose like a physical blow. This wasn't some garden party or afternoon tea. This was a wedding. She'd been invited, mysteriously, anonymously, to a stranger's wedding. I didn't realize," Rose stammered, but the woman had already lost interest. turning to her companion with a whispered comment that made them both laugh as they walked away. Rose stood frozen. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to take Samuel's hand and walk back through those gates, back to the train station, back to their small safe life in Bath where nobody knew their secrets and nobody asked uncomfortable questions. But that card, those words, bring the child, someone knew, and someone wanted her here, today, for a reason. Mama! Samuel tugged her hand again. What's wrong? Rose took a breath. Nothing, sweetheart. We're going inside. To a wedding. His eyes lit up. Never been to a wedding before. Will there be cake? Despite everything, Rose felt her lips twitch. Probably. Then let's go. Samuel pulled her forward with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. The church doors stood open, revealing a glimpse of the interior. Packed pews cut elaborate flower arrangements, the backs of dozens of well-dressed heads. Rose's courage nearly failed again, but Samuel was already pulling her through the doorway, and suddenly they were inside. The church was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by ancient stone pillars. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the congregation in blues and reds and golds. White flowers, she didn't know enough about flowers to name them, but they were clearly expensive, decorated every available surface. Silk ribbons in cream and gold draped the pews. And it was full hundreds of people, all dressed in their finest, all turned toward the altar where Rose's breath caught. A man stood there, tall, dark-haired, his back to the congregation as he waited beside the priest. Even from this distance, even seeing only his silhouette, something about his posture, the way he held himself, seemed achingly familiar. Mama, everyone's staring at us, Samuel whispered loudly. He was right. Heads were turning. The murmur of conversation had changed pitch, becoming pointed, curious, disapproving. A woman in the third pew leaned toward her companion, her whisper carrying in the sudden quiet, "Who would bring a child to a formal wedding?" Rose felt heat creep up her neck. She should leave. She should. "Excuse me." The voice was low, female, and absolutely frigid. Rose turned. A woman had risen from the front pew, tall, slender, dressed in deep blue silk with a hat that probably cost more than Rose's entire wardrobe. She was perhaps 60, with iron-grey hair swept into an elegant chignon and eyes like chips of ice. "I'm afraid there's been some mistake," the woman said, her voice pitched to carry. "This is a private ceremony." "I was invited," Rose said again, reaching into her small bag for the card. "Impossible. I personally oversaw every invitation." The woman's eyes swept over Rose, taking in her modest dress, her worn gloves, the small bag that had been her mother's. The judgment in that gaze was absolute. "And children are certainly not welcome at a formal wedding ceremony." Samuel pressed closer to Rose's side. "Mama, why is she angry?" "I'm not angry, child," the woman said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm simply—" She stopped. Her eyes had landed on Samuel's face, and something changed in her expression. The color drained from her cheeks. Her lips parted slightly, as if she'd forgotten how to speak. Rose saw it happen. The moment of recognition, or perhaps not recognition, exactly, but realization. This woman was looking at Samuel and seeing something, someone. "Who are you?" the woman whispered, though her voice still somehow carried through the church. Before Rose could answer, Samuel, bless him and curse him in equal measure, spoke up in his clear, innocent voice. "I'm Samuel, Samuel Hayes. We came because of the invitation, but Mama didn't know it was a wedding. She would have worn something nicer if she'd known." The comment about Rose's dress sent another wave of whispers through the congregation, but the woman wasn't paying attention to that. She was still staring at Samuel, her face now absolutely white. "Hayes?" she repeated. Then her gaze snapped to Rose. No, it can't be." "I'm Rose Hayes," Rose said, finding her voice. "And I received this." She held out the invitation card. The woman snatched it from her hand, examining it with shaking fingers. Her eyes widened as she recognized the paper, the script. "Where did you get this?" It was barely a whisper now. "It was delivered to my home 6 days ago." The woman's jaw clenched. Her eyes darted to the back of the church, to somewhere, someone Rose couldn't see, then back to Rose, then to Samuel, and then, finally, inevitably, the man at the altar turned around. Later, Rose would remember this moment in fragments, the way the light from the stained glass window fell across his face, painting it in colors that weren't quite real. the way her heart stopped, then started again, beating so hard she thought everyone must hear it. The way 6 years collapsed into nothing, and she was 20 again, sitting in a library with a young man who made her laugh, who looked at her like she was something precious. James. His name was a wound that had never healed, a scar she'd learned to live with, a ghost that haunted every day of the past 6 years. James Blackwell stood at the altar, in a perfectly tailored morning coat, every inch the Duke he'd become. His dark hair was shorter than she remembered, touched with grey at the temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. His face had new lines, responsibility, grief, the weight of a title he'd never wanted. But his eyes were the same, green gold that could shift between emerald and amber depending on the light. Eyes she'd once known by heart, eyes that Samuel had inherited down to the smallest fleck of colour. And those eyes were fixed on her with an expression of absolute shock. The church had gone utterly silent. Even the organ had stopped playing, the organist apparently as transfixed by the drama unfolding as everyone else. Rose watched James's gaze move from her face to Samuel, watched him go pale, watched his lips form a word, a question that he didn't quite speak. Samuel, oblivious to the tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm, waved. It was a small gesture, innocent, just a child being friendly to a stranger. Just a little boy with unruly blonde hair and green gold eyes raising his hand in greeting. But Rose saw the moment it broke something in James, saw him take a step back, as if physically struck, saw his hand reach out, grasping for the altar to steady himself. James! A woman's voice, sharp with concern. For the first time, Rose noticed the bride. She stood to the side of the altar, a vision in white lace and silk. Beautiful, of course, classically so, with porcelain skin and dark hair arranged in perfect curls beneath her veil. The kind of woman who belonged in a place like this, who fit seamlessly into this world of wealth and propriety. The kind of woman James was supposed to marry. The woman, his bride, was staring at James with confusion that was rapidly turning to alarm. James, what's wrong? Who is that woman? But James didn't answer. He was walking down the aisle now, his steps stiff and mechanical, his eyes never leaving Samuel. The congregation parted like water, people shifting in their pews to watch as the Duke of Blackwell abandoned his own wedding altar and walked toward a strange woman and her child. James, he'd stop! The bride's voice rose, losing its composure. What are you doing? He didn't stop, didn't even seem to hear her. He walked until he stood 3 feet from Rose and Samuel, close enough that Rose could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the way his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Rose, he said, and his voice cracked on her name. Rose Hayes. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a prayer, a wound reopening. Hello, James, she said quietly. Samuel looked up at the tall man towering over them. Do you know my mama? The question hung in the air like smoke. James's eyes dropped to the boy, and Rose saw something she'd never seen before on his face. Raw eyes, undiluted panic. James swallowed hard. How old is he? Not, who is he? Or, is this your son? Straight to, how old is he? Because James was many things, but he'd never been stupid. 5.5, Samuel answered proudly before Rose could respond. I'll be 6 in October. Rose watched James do the math, watched the colour drain from his face as he calculated back. October, 6 years ago, the last summer before his father died, the last summer before everything changed. No, James whispered. No, you can't. You didn't. This is outrageous. The shout came from the altar. The bride was marching down the aisle now, her veil streaming behind her, her beautiful face twisted with fury. James, get back here this instant. Who is this woman? Why is she here? Why? She stopped abruptly as she got close enough to see Samuel clearly. Her eyes widened. Oh my God! The woman in blue, James's mother, Rose realized with a sinking feeling, stepped forward. We need to move this discussion somewhere private. Now. I agree. A new voice. An older man with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. Lord Sheffield. Clear the church. Tell the guests there's been a family emergency. The ceremony is postponed. Postponed? The bride shrieked. Postponed! We are not postponing! Rosalind. James's mother's voice cut like a knife. Compose yourself. We will discuss this in the vestry. All of us. Away from 300 witnesses. For a moment, Rose thought the bride, Rosalind, would refuse, but something in the older woman's tone, some note of absolute authority, made her snap her mouth shut. Her eyes, when they fixed on Rose, were filled with pure venom. "Fine," Rosalind bit out, "but this had better have a very good explanation." James's mother turned to Rose. "You, come with me, and bring the boy." It wasn't a request, but Rose had known from the moment she walked through those church doors that she wasn't walking back out until this played out to its conclusion. She took Samuel's hand. "It's all right, sweetheart. Just stay close to me." "But Mama, what's happening? Why is everyone upset?" "I'll explain later, I promise." They were ushered through a side door, James's mother leading the way with the swift efficiency of a general marshalling troops. Behind them, Rose could hear the confused murmur of the congregation rising to a roar as a man, Lord Sheffield presumably, began explaining that the ceremony was being postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. The vestry was a small room off the main church, lined with cabinets containing ceremonial robes and religious paraphernalia. There were no windows, just gas lamps that cast everything in a warm, slightly ominous glow. Once inside, James's mother shut the door with a decisive click and turned to face them. 6 people in a small room: Rose and Samuel, James, his mother, Rosalind, and Lord Sheffield, who'd apparently followed them in. The silence was suffocating. Samuel pressed against Rose's side, his earlier excitement replaced by apprehension. "Mama, I don't like this." "I know, love. Just a few more minutes." "Who?" Rosalind began, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Is this woman?" James's mother held up a hand. "Before anyone speaks, I want to see that invitation." Rose pulled it from her bag and handed it over. The older woman examined it carefully, her face growing increasingly severe. "This is Richmond. No, Blackwell paper. Our old family stationery from before." She trailed off, looking at James. "From when your father was alive." "That's impossible," James said hoarsely. "Father's been dead for 6 years." "I'm aware of that." His mother's tone could have frozen fire. "Which means someone has been keeping this paper all this time." Her eyes snapped to the door. "A Harper." The door opened immediately, as if the person on the other side had been waiting for exactly this summons. A woman entered, perhaps 70, with steel-grey hair and eyes that had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. She wore the black dress and white apron of a head housekeeper. "You called, Your Grace. Did you send this?" James's mother thrust the invitation toward her. Mrs. Harper took it, examined it, and then looked up with absolutely no remorse on her weathered face. "I did." "You—" James's mother actually seemed at a loss for words. "Or why?" "Because His Grace, the late Duke, asked me to—" Silence. "Then, explain," James's mother commanded, her voice deadly quiet. Mrs. Harper clasped her hands in front of her. "6 years ago, 2 weeks before he died, His Grace called me to his study. He was already ill, though we didn't know how little time he had left. He gave me a blank card, our family stationery, already signed with his seal at the bottom. And he gave me instructions." "What instructions?" James asked hoarsely. He said, "Harper, if my son ever attempts to marry without love, and you'll know if he does, because you see everything in this house, you are to find Miss Rose Hayes. Send her this invitation with the date and location of the wedding. Tell her to bring the child, if there is one. Tell her she has every right to be there." He was very specific about that last part. "He knew about me," Rose whispered. "He'd seen you together, Miss Hayes. In the gardens, in the library. He told me he recognized true affection when he saw it, and he would not stand by and watch his son make the same mistake he'd made, marrying for duty rather than love." Helena had gone very pale. Edward knew about her all this time. He knew his son was in love, Your Grace. And when Miss Hayes disappeared so suddenly after his death, Mrs. Harper's eyes moved to Helena with quiet accusation. "He suspected interference, so he left me instructions. And 3 weeks ago, when the engagement to Lady Rosalind was announced, I knew it was time to act." 3 weeks ago, James repeated. "You've been planning this for 3 weeks. I've been following His Grace's wishes for 6 years, Your Grace. I simply waited for the right moment, or rather the necessary moment." "You tracked me down?" Rose asked. "I'm still processing." "It took some effort, miss. You'd moved from your last known address, but I have resources. When I found you in Bath, I wrote the invitation myself, the date, the time, the location, and I added His Grace's instruction. Bring the child, because if there was a child, His Grace wanted his son to know." "You can't be serious," Rosalind said. "To a dead man's matchmaking scheme." His Grace was quite serious, my lady. He said—" Mrs. Harper's eyes softened slightly. "He said he'd seen his son with Miss Hayes. In the gardens. In the library. He said he recognized true affection when he saw it, and that he would not let his son make the mistake he himself had made." James's mother had gone very pale. "What mistake?" "Marrying for duty rather than love, Your Grace. Forgive me for speaking plainly." The room was so quiet Rose could hear her own heartbeat. She felt James's eyes on her but couldn't bring herself to look at him. Not yet. "This is insane," Rosalind said flatly. "So an old man had romantic delusions. That doesn't explain why this woman appeared today with a conveniently aged child." "Don't," James said sharply. Rosalind turned to him. "Don't what? Point out the obvious. James, look at this rationally. She shows up, uninvited." "She was invited," Mrs. Harper interjected mildly. "With a child she claims is yours, on the very day of your wedding. It's transparently manipulative." "I never claimed he was James's," Rose said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. It was the first time she'd spoken since entering the vestry. "I didn't even know this was James's wedding," Rose continued, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The invitation had no names, just an address and a time. I came because—" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Because it said to bring my son, and I needed to know who sent it and why." "How convenient that you didn't recognize the name Blackwell," Rosalind sneered. "I knew James as just James," Rose said, meeting her eyes. "When we met, I didn't know who he was at first. He never mentioned his title, never acted like someone born to privilege. By the time I found out, I was already—" She stopped herself. "It doesn't matter anymore. I didn't connect the invitation to James because I wasn't reading society pages to track who married whom. I was too busy surviving." "Mama," Samuel whispered, "who are all these people?" Rose's heart broke a little. "People we used to know, sweetheart." James was staring at Samuel with an expression Rose couldn't quite read. "October," he said hoarsely. "You said his birthday is in October." "October 15th, Rose confirmed. 6 years ago." James's hands were shaking now. 6 years ago, October, which means he was born 9 months after the last time we saw each other, Rose finished quietly. "Yes. Oh my God," James breathed. "This proves nothing," Rosalind insisted, but there was a note of desperation in her voice now. "Timing can be coincidental. For the child might not even be—" "Ah, look at him," James's mother said abruptly. Everyone turned to her. She was staring at Samuel with an expression that was almost frightened. "Just look at him," she repeated softly. "Really, look." They did. And Rose saw the moment each person in the room registered what James's mother had seen immediately. Samuel had James's eyes, not just the color, that unusual green gold that could look green in some lights, gold in others, but the shape, the way they tilted slightly upward at the outer corners, the thick lashes that were absurdly long for a boy. He had the Blackwell nose, straight and aristocratic, though still small and childish on his young face. He had James's hair texture, thick and prone to cowlicks no amount of brushing could tame, and when Samuel smiled uncertainly up at the adults staring at him, he had James's exact smile, the one that had made Rose fall in love 6 years ago. "Ah, dear God," Lord Sheffield murmured. "He's the very image of you at that age, Your Grace." James sank into a chair as if his legs would no longer hold him. "I have a son." "We don't know that for certain," Rosalind tried again, but even she sounded unconvinced now. "I have a son," James repeated, and this time it wasn't a statement of fact. It was a wound. "For 5 years. And I never knew." He looked up at Rose, and she saw accusation mixed with anguish in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was, the question she'd been dreading for 6 years. Rose took a breath. "Because I tried, and you never responded." "I never—" James stood abruptly. "What do you mean you tried?" "I wrote to you. Twice. The first time about 3 weeks after you left, when I realized you weren't coming back. The second time 3 months later, when I knew for certain I was pregnant. I never received any letters from you," James said flatly. "I know that now." They both turned to look at James's mother. Lady Helena Blackwell met their gazes, with her head held high, unrepentant. I intercepted them. Yes, both of them. The confession landed like a stone in still water, ripples of shock spreading through the room. "Mother," James said, and his voice was dangerous. "Casey, what did you do?" "What I had to do," Helena replied sharply. "Your father had just died. You'd inherited a title with more debt than assets. We had properties on the verge of foreclosure, political alliances that needed shoring up, a reputation that required careful management. You needed to marry well, James, not throw everything away on a music teacher's daughter. She was pregnant, James shouted, making Samuel flinch. Rose immediately crouched down, pulling her son close. It's all right, sweetheart. No one's angry at you. But everyone's shouting, Samuel said, his eyes wide and frightened. I know, but it's not about you. You haven't done anything wrong. James was breathing hard, staring at his mother with something approaching hatred. You knew she might be pregnant and you still intercepted the letters. I didn't know for certain. The first letter made no mention of a child, only that she wished to see you again. Typical young love nonsense. The second letter, Helena's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The second letter mentioned a delicate matter she wished to discuss. I assumed it was an attempt to extort money. So you just threw them away? Destroyed them? I protected this family, Helena said coldly, as I have always done, as your father never could, with his romantic notions and his bleeding heart. My father, James said with deadly quiet, apparently had the wisdom to see what you couldn't, that some things matter more than money and title. Sentiment will not keep a roof over your head or food on your table. Neither will a marriage built on lies. He turned to Rosalind, and Rose saw something shift in his expression, horror, perhaps, at what he'd almost done. I'm sorry. We can't. Don't you dare, Rosalind said, her voice shaking. Don't you dare say what I think you're about to say. I need time, James said, to understand this. To what? Play house with your mistress and her bastard. That's enough. Lord Sheffield's voice cracked like a whip. Lady Rosalind, I understand you're upset, but... Upset? Rosalind laughed, high and slightly unhinged. I've just been humiliated in front of 300 people. My wedding has been destroyed by some woman who conveniently appears with a child right before the ceremony. And you want me to be calm? I want you to remember who you are, Helena said sharply. You are a Fairchild. Act like it. For a moment, Rosalind looked like she might strike the older woman. Then, with visible effort, she pulled herself together. Fine, she said, her voice like ice. You want time, James. You'll have it. I'll return to Fairchild House with my family, and when you've finished this, whatever this is, you can come find me, if I'm still interested. She swept toward the door, then paused, turning back to look at Rose with naked contempt. You think you've won something, Rosalind said softly, but all you've done is paint a target on yourself and that child. Welcome to our world, Miss Hayes. I hope you survive it. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her hard enough to make the religious icons on the walls rattle. In the silence that followed, Samuel started to cry. Mama, I want to go home, he sobbed. I don't like it here. Everyone's angry and I want to go home. Rose gathered him into her arms, her own eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. I know, baby. I know. We'll leave soon. I promise. No. She looked up. James was standing over them, his face pale but determined. You can't leave, he said. Not yet. Not until we... He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in ways that would have horrified his valet. I have a son, and I've missed 5 years of his life because of my mother's interference. I'm not losing another day. You can't just demand we stay, Rose said sharply. I'm not demanding. I'm asking. Please. The words seemed to cost him. Can I stay at Blackwell Manor, both of you? Just for a few days. Let me get to know him, and let us figure out what happens next. What happens next? Rose laughed bitterly. What happens next is we go home, James. Back to our life. The life we've built without you. A life where my son doesn't know his father. A life where my son is safe and loved and doesn't have to watch grown adults scream at each other. Samuel was crying harder now, his small body shaking with sobs. Rose's heart clenched. I think, Lord Sheffield said quietly, that perhaps we all need to take a breath. Your Grace, Miss Hayes is right that the child is distressed. Might I suggest we adjourn to Blackwell Manor? Miss Hayes and the boy can be given rooms in the guest wing. Everyone can rest, compose themselves, and we can continue this discussion when calmer heads prevail. A reasonable suggestion, Helena said crisply. She turned to Rose. You'll stay, for Samuel's sake if nothing else. He deserves to know his heritage. He deserves a childhood without scandal, Rose countered. Then we'll be discreet. No one need know the exact circumstances of his arrival. We'll say you're a distant cousin, visiting with your son. You want me to lie? I want to protect a child from gossip that could destroy him, Helena said flatly. Or would you prefer he grow up knowing the world sees him as a bastard? Rose flinched. Samuel didn't know that word, didn't understand what it meant to be born outside of marriage, but he would, eventually, and when he did, all right, she said quietly, we'll stay for a few days. But if I decide to leave, you won't stop me. Helena's lips thinned, but she nodded. Agreed. James was staring at Samuel with an expression of wonder and grief so profound it hurt to witness. Samuel, he said softly. The boy looked up, his face blotchy and wet with tears. I'm sorry we frightened you, James said, crouching down to Samuel's level. None of this is your fault. You've done nothing wrong. Then why is everyone angry? Because grown-ups are sometimes foolish. We don't always say things the right way, or do things the right way, but you're perfect exactly as you are. Samuel sniffled. Really? Really? James smiled, and it transformed his face. Would you like to come see my home? There are horses, and a very large library. And cook makes the best biscuits in all of England. Better than Mama's. Well, James glanced at Rose, perhaps tied for the best. Despite everything, Rose felt her lips twitch. Samuel considered this. Will the angry lady be there? No. Lady Rosalind has gone home. Good, I didn't like her. Samuel, Rose said, mortified, but James laughed, really laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. That's all right. I don't think she liked me much either by the end. Can we really see the horses? Any horse you want, even the big ones. Even the big ones. Samuel turned to Rose. Mama, can we stay, just to see the horses? And looking into her son's hopeful, tear-stained face, Rose knew she was already trapped, because Samuel wanted to stay, and she'd spent 5 years making sure Samuel had everything she could possibly give him, even when she had almost nothing to give. If he wanted to see horses and eat biscuits and spend a few days in a manor house before they returned to their ordinary life, how could she deny him? Just for a few days, she said. Samuel's face lit up like sunrise. Thank you, Mama. James stood, offering Rose his hand to help her up. She hesitated, then took it. His hand was warm, calloused in unexpected places, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. For just a moment, as he pulled her to her feet, they were standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of sandalwood soap that she remembered from 6 years ago. Then he released her hand and stepped back, and the moment broke. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for giving me this chance. Rose didn't answer, couldn't answer, because she wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing or making the worst mistake of her life. Lord Sheffield cleared his throat. I'll make arrangements for the guests. Some explanation will need to be given. Tell them the bride was taken ill, Helena said crisply. A sudden indisposition. The wedding is postponed indefinitely while she recovers. Hey, it's scandal enough without adding fuel to the fire. And Miss Hayes, a cousin from Bath visiting with her son, arrived unexpectedly. No one will question it if we don't give them reason to. You're very good at deception, Rose observed. Helena met her eyes. I'm very good at survival. You would do well to learn the difference. Before Rose could respond, Mrs. Harper appeared at the door. The carriages are ready, Your Grace. Shall I take Miss Hayes and the young master to prepare? Yes, and Harper. Helena's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Thank you for honoring His Grace's final wishes. The old housekeeper's eyes gleamed with something that might have been tears. He was a good man. He deserved to be obeyed in this, at least. As Mrs. Harper led them out through a side door to avoid the lingering guests, Rose heard James's voice behind her. Mother, we're not finished with this conversation. I know. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your mother. You're the reason I have a son I've never met. Their voices faded as Rose and Samuel followed Mrs. Harper through a series of corridors that connected the church to what had to be Blackwell Manor. Samuel held Rose's hand, quieter now, processing everything he'd witnessed. Mama, is that man really my father? Rose's heart clenched. Yes, sweetheart. Why didn't you tell me before? Because it's complicated. You always say things are complicated when you don't want to explain. Rose couldn't help but smile despite everything. You're right. I do. I'm sorry. It's okay. Samuel was quiet for a moment. He seems nice. My father, he was. Rose sighed. Yes, he's nice. Then why didn't he want us? And there it was. The question that cut deepest. He didn't know about you, Rose said carefully. If he had known, he would have wanted you very much. He just didn't know. Because his mother threw away your letters. Rose hadn't realized Samuel had understood that part. Yes, that was mean of her. Yes. It was... They emerged from the corridor into a grand entrance hall that took Rose's breath away. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a staircase that swept upward in a graceful curve, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors lining the walls. This was James's home, the world he'd inherited when his father died, the world Rose had never been meant to enter. "This way, miss," Mrs. Harper said gently, leading them up the stairs. "I've prepared the blue suite in the east wing. It has a lovely view of the gardens, and there's an adjoining room for the young master." "That's very kind, Mrs. Harper." The housekeeper paused, turning to look at Rose with eyes that had seen 6 decades of secrets and scandals. "His Grace, the late Duke, he spoke of you, you know. Near the end, he said his son had finally learned to love, and that no title or fortune was worth sacrificing, that he wanted—" She trailed off, then finished quietly. "He wanted you to be happy, both of you." Tears burned Rose's eyes. "I wish I could have thanked him. You're here now. That's thanks enough." Mrs. Harper continued up the stairs, but Rose paused, looking back at the entrance hall below. Through the windows, she could see the church in the distance, could imagine the guests dispersing, carrying their gossip and speculation back to their own homes, could picture Rosalind Fairchild's rage, Helena's cold calculations, James's dawning realization of all he'd lost. This was a mistake. She should take Samuel and leave before they got any deeper into this world that had already caused so much pain. But Samuel tugged her hand, pulling her forward. "Come on, Mama, I want to see our rooms." And Rose, as she had so many times before, followed her son into the unknown. The blue suite lived up to its name. Rose stood in the doorway, Samuel's hand still clutched in hers, and tried not to let her jaw drop. The room was easily 3 times the size of their entire lodging in Bath. Walls papered in powder blue silk, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a 4-poster bed with velvet curtains, an escritoire inlaid with mother-of-pearl, chairs upholstered in fabric so fine Rose was afraid to touch them. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, though the June afternoon was warm enough that it wasn't needed. Fresh flowers, roses ironically, sat in crystal vases on every surface. The windows overlooked manicured gardens that stretched as far as she could see. "The young master's room is through here," Mrs. Harper said, opening a connecting door. Samuel's room was smaller, but no less luxurious. The bed was carved with horses and dogs, clearly meant for a child. There were toy soldiers arranged on a shelf, a rocking horse that looked hand-painted, even a small bookcase filled with children's stories. "I took the liberty of preparing it when I sent the invitation," Mrs. Harper said quietly. I hoped you'd come. You went to a lot of trouble," Rose said, her throat tight. His Grace, the late Duke, would have wanted the boy welcomed properly. Mrs. Harper's weathered face softened. "He was a good man, Miss Hayes. He would have been proud to call the child his grandson." Before Rose could respond, Samuel pulled free of her hand and ran to the rocking horse, climbing on with a whoop of delight. "Mama, look, it's beautiful." "Careful, sweetheart, that's not ours." "It is now," Mrs. Harper said firmly. "Everything in this room belongs to Master Samuel. His Grace made that clear in his instructions. If there was a child, that child was to be treated as family, full family, not some lesser relation." The emphasis on those last words suggested Mrs. Harper had opinions about how illegitimate children were typically treated in aristocratic households. Rose sank into one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the church, the confrontation, the carriage ride here was draining away, leaving her hollow. "I've arranged for tea to be brought up," Mrs. Harper continued, "and a light supper for the boy. I imagine the last thing you want is to dine with everyone tonight." "You imagine correctly. His Grace will likely wish to see Master Samuel later. If you're amenable." Rose looked at Samuel, happily rocking back and forth on his new horse. "I suppose he has that right." "He does, but so do you. The right to refuse, if you think the boy isn't ready." Rose studied the housekeeper. "You're being very kind to me." "Why?" Mrs. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I watched His Grace, the late Duke, die with regrets. Because I've watched the current Duke live under his mother's thumb for 6 years, becoming someone he wasn't meant to be, and because I've spent 60 years in service to this family, And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love matters more than bloodlines, no matter what her grace believes. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Miss Hayes. Lady Rosalind is staying. Rose's head snapped up. What? Her grace convinced her it would be unwise to leave. She's been given rooms in the West Wing. I thought you should know. Of course she has, Rose said bitterly, because this situation wasn't complicated enough. Indeed, I'll send up that tea. After Mrs. Harper left, Rose sat watching Samuel play, her mind spinning. Rosalind was staying, under the same roof. The woman who'd been about to marry James, the woman whose wedding Rose had inadvertently destroyed. This was going to be a disaster. Tea arrived on a silver tray carried by a maid who couldn't have been more than 16 and who stared at Rose with undisguised curiosity. Clearly, the servants already knew something dramatic had happened, even if they didn't know the details. Samuel ate 3 sandwiches, 2 scones with jam, and a slice of seed cake, chattering between bites about the rocking horse and asking if he could really ride a real horse tomorrow, and would there be other children to play with, and how big was the library exactly? Rose answered as best she could while drinking her tea. Real tea, the expensive kind. Served in china so delicate, she was terrified of breaking it. She was just finishing her second cup when there was a knock at the door. Rose tensed. Come in. The door opened to reveal James. He'd changed out of his wedding finery into more casual clothes. Well, casual for a duke, which still meant perfectly tailored trousers and a waistcoat that probably cost more than Rose earned in 3 months. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. I'm sorry to intrude, he said, staying in the doorway. I wanted to see if you had everything you needed. We're fine, thank you. An awkward silence fell. James's eyes kept drifting to Samuel, who had paused his playing to stare at this tall stranger with open curiosity. Are you really my father? Samuel asked, with the bluntness only a child could manage. James swallowed hard. Yes, I am. Mama said you didn't know about me. I didn't. But I wish I had. He trailed off, clearly struggling. I would have liked to know you from the beginning. Samuel considered this. Do you like horses? The sudden change of subject made James blink. Yes, very much. Me too. Except I've never ridden one, just seen them pulling carts. But Mama says maybe tomorrow I can learn. Can you teach me? Rose saw something in James's face crack open. Joy and grief mixed so thoroughly, she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I would be honored to teach you, James said softly. Samuel, finish your tea, Rose interjected. You must be tired from the journey. But Mama. No arguments. Samuel pouted, but obediently returned to his tea and cake. James remained in the doorway, seemingly unable to leave but unsure if he was welcome to enter. May I come in? He finally asked. Just for a few minutes. Rose wanted to say no, wanted to protect the fragile calm she'd managed to create in this room, this bubble where it was just her and Samuel and nothing had to be decided yet. But she couldn't. Because James was Samuel's father, and denying him access felt cruel even if part of her wanted to be cruel, wanted to make him hurt the way she'd hurt for 6 years. All right, she said. A few minutes. James entered like he was walking on glass, moving carefully to one of the chairs near the fireplace. He sat on the edge, posture rigid, hands clasped between his knees. He's remarkable, James said, watching Samuel demolish another scone. Is he always so cheerful? Usually. He's a happy child. You've done an extraordinary job raising him. The compliment felt both genuine and inadequate. I did what needed to be done, alone, for 5 years, because my mother, his jaw clenched. I don't have words for what she did, what she stole from both of us, from all 3 of us, Rose corrected quietly. James looked at her, then really looked at her for the first time since they'd been alone. His eyes traced her face like he was memorizing it, or perhaps comparing it to the girl he'd known 6 years ago. You've changed, he said. People do, especially when they're forced to grow up quickly. I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving. For not fighting harder to come back. For believing you'd just forgotten about me. Rose laughed without humor. Hard to forget someone when you're carrying their child. Rose, don't. She held up a hand. I don't apologize again. It doesn't change anything. You didn't know, I understand that now, but the 6 years still happened. I still lived them, and I can't just erase them because we've cleared up the misunderstanding. I'm not asking you to erase them. I just want a chance to be part of his life. And maybe, he hesitated, Maybe to understand who you are now, because you're right. We're not the same people we were. Before Rose could respond, Samuel climbed into her lap, suddenly sleepy despite his earlier energy. He curled against her chest, thumb creeping toward his mouth, a habit she'd been trying to break him of. "Tired, sweetheart," she murmured. It's been a very big day." "It has indeed." James watched them with an expression Rose couldn't quite read. Longing, certainly, but also something that looked almost like envy. "Did he do that often?" he asked quietly. "Fall asleep on you like that?" "Every afternoon when he was smaller. Still does sometimes, when he's overwhelmed." "I missed it," James said, and his voice cracked. "I missed all of it. First words, first steps, everything." His first word was more. Rose found herself saying, not mama or papa, just more, because he always wanted more of everything, more food, more stories, more songs. He walked at 11 months, nearly gave me a heart attack because he refused to crawl like normal babies, just pulled himself up one day and took off running. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this. Maybe because the grief on his face demanded it. Maybe because some small buried part of her had always wanted to share these stories with someone who would care. "Kelly used to wake up at dawn," she continued, stroking Samuel's hair as the boy's breathing deepened into sleep. "Every single morning, no matter what time I put him to bed, I'd hear him talking to himself in his cradle, just babbling away to his stuffed rabbit. He has your eyes, but he has my stubbornness." That sounds like a dangerous combination. It is. Silence fell again, but this time it was less sharp. James leaned back in the chair, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "What's he like?" James asked. "Beyond what I can see." Rose considered the question. "He's kind, almost to a fault. He cries if he sees someone hurt, even in picture books. He's curious about everything, asks approximately 1,000 questions a day. He's terrible at sitting still, but can focus for hours if he's building something or listening to music." "Music, like you. Like my father, more precisely. Papa used to say Samuel had the ear of a true musician. He can hear a melody once and hum it back perfectly. Your father passed away 2 years ago. Influenza. The grief was still there, but duller now. He adored Samuel. Was the only family we had." James's face tightened. "I'm sorry. That you had to face that alone too." "I'm used to alone." "You shouldn't be." Rose looked down at Samuel, now fully asleep in her arms. "We should get him to bed properly. It's been an exhausting day for all of us." James stood immediately. "Of course, I'll leave you to—" "You can carry him," Rose said, surprising herself, "to his bed, if you'd like." The hope that flashed across James's face was almost painful to witness. "Guess really, he's heavy when he's sleeping. Dead weight." It was a practical excuse, but they both knew that wasn't why she was offering. This was an olive branch, a small one, but an olive branch nonetheless. James approached carefully, and Rose stood, transferring Samuel's sleeping weight into his father's arms. The boy mumbled something unintelligible but didn't wake, just shifted to press his face against James's shoulder. James stood frozen, looking down at the child in his arms like he'd been handed something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. "He's so small," James whispered. "He'll be 6 in October, not so small anymore." "To me, he is." Rose led the way to Samuel's room, pulling back the covers on the bed. James laid Samuel down with a gentleness that made her throat tight. The boy immediately curled onto his side, one hand tucked under his cheek. Rose removed his shoes, loosened his collar. James watched every movement like he was memorizing it. "Thank you," he said as they stepped back into Rose's room, leaving the connecting door slightly ajar. "For letting me do that. He's your son. You have a right. But you have the right to refuse. You could make this very difficult for me, and you'd be justified." Rose met his eyes. "I'm not interested in punishing you through Samuel. Whatever anger I have, and I do have anger, James, don't mistake this for forgiveness. That's between you and me. Samuel deserves to know his father if his father wants to know him." "I do. God, I do. I just don't know how to. I don't know what I'm doing." "None of us do. We just do our best and hope it's enough." James ran a hand through his hair again, that old nervous gesture she remembered. "I should let you rest. But Rose, tomorrow, could the 3 of us spend time together? I want to learn about him, about you, about who you've both become." Rose hesitated. Spending time together felt dangerous, felt like opening a door she'd locked 6 years ago, but Samuel's sleepy question echoed in her mind. Is he really my father? And James was. That was a fact, immutable and undeniable, and Samuel deserved better than parents who could barely speak to each other. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow." "But James, don't push too hard. He's a child. He needs time to adjust to all of this." "I understand. I'll follow your lead." "Good." James moved toward the door, then paused. "You know, I used to imagine what it would be like to see you again. In all those imaginings, I never pictured this." "What did you imagine?" "I don't know. That you'd married someone else. That you'd forgotten me. That I'd see you at some social function, and we'd have a polite, meaningless conversation, and that would be the end of it. Instead, you got a son and a destroyed wedding. Instead, I got a chance to fix the worst mistake I never knew I'd made." Rose didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. After a moment, James left, closing the door softly behind him. Rose sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Through the connecting door, she could hear Samuel's soft breathing. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Blackwell estate, painting everything gold. She should feel triumphant, or vindicated, or something other than this hollow exhaustion. But all she felt was uncertain, because tomorrow would come and she'd have to navigate a world she'd never been prepared for, filled with people who had every reason to hate her, including the woman who was supposed to have married James today. Rose woke to Samuel bouncing on her bed. "Mama, Mama, wake up. There's a man at the door with a tray, and he says it's breakfast, and there's chocolate and eggs and things I don't even know the names of, and can I please have some?" Rose groaned, squinting at the morning light streaming through windows she'd forgotten to curtain. "What time is it?" "I don't know, but the sun's up, so it must be time for breakfast." A knock at the door preceded a male voice. "Miss Hayes, I have your breakfast tray, if you're awake." Rose quickly pulled on the dressing gown Mrs. Harper had thoughtfully provided, far finer than anything Rose owned, and called, "Come in." A footman entered with a tray laden with enough food for 4 people. Eggs, bacon, toast, jam, butter, fresh fruit, pastries, and yes, a small pot of chocolate for Samuel, who looked like he might explode from excitement. "Mrs. Harper thought you might prefer to breakfast in your room this morning," the footman said, setting the tray on a table near the window. "But His Grace requests your presence in the morning room at 10 o'clock, if you're amenable." "Tell His Grace we'll be there," Rose said, because what else could she say? After the footman left, Samuel dove into the chocolate while Rose tried to wrap her mind around the fact that this was her life now, at least temporarily. Breakfast trays, footmen, rooms the size of houses. She was helping Samuel wash chocolate off his face when another knock came. "Miss Hayes?" A woman's voice this time. "I'm Jenny, Mrs. Harper sent me to help you dress and to tend to the young master." Rose opened the door to find a young maid with kind eyes and an armload of fabric. "I don't need help dressing," Rose started. "Begging your pardon, miss, but Her Grace insists all ladies in residence have a proper lady's maid." And Jenny's eyes dropped to Rose's simple cotton dress, laid over a chair. "Mrs. Harper thought you might like some additional wardrobe options, just until your trunks arrive." "I don't have trunks." "Ah, well, then these are gifts from the household." The gifts turned out to be 3-day dresses in Rose's size. How Mrs. Harper had guessed, Rose couldn't imagine, in soft colors that would actually suit her. Not the elaborate confections she'd seen on the ladies at the church, but fine enough that she wouldn't look like a governess next to them, pride warred with practicality. Rose had exactly 2 dresses to her name, and one of them had a stain she'd never quite managed to remove. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Please thank Mrs. Harper for me." "She said you'd argue," Jenny said with a small smile. "Told me to tell you that if you're going to survive in this house, you'll need armor, and a proper dress is armor for a lady." Rose couldn't argue with that logic. By the time 10 o'clock arrived, Rose and Samuel were dressed and presentable. Rose in a soft grey dress with minimal trim, Samuel in clothes that had also mysteriously appeared, proper children's attire, not the single suit they'd arrived in. "Do I look like a gentleman?" Samuel asked, examining himself in the mirror. "You look very handsome. Will my father think so?" The casual way Samuel said "my father," as if he'd already accepted this enormous change, made Rose's chest ache. "I'm sure he will." A footman appeared to guide them to the morning room. As they walked through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced Blackwells, Rose tried to memorize the route. She refused to be one of those people who got lost in their own temporary residence. The morning room was smaller than she'd expected, though still larger than her entire lodging in Bath, with windows overlooking a rose garden. James stood when they entered, setting down a newspaper. "Oh, good morning," he said, and his smile when he saw Samuel was genuine and warm. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well," Samuel announced. "The bed is so soft I felt like I was sleeping on clouds, and this morning there was chocolate for breakfast. Real chocolate. Mama never lets me have chocolate for breakfast at home." "Because chocolate is not a suitable breakfast," Rose said, giving James a look that suggested she didn't appreciate having her parenting undermined by luxury. James had the grace to look sheepish. "I may have suggested to Cook that the boy might enjoy some treats. I didn't realize it would undermine your authority. I apologize." "Mama, what does undermine how mean?" "It means making someone's job harder." Samuel's face fell. "I made Mama's job harder." "No, sweetheart, your father did, by spoiling you." "Oh," Samuel brightened. "That's okay then." Despite herself, Rose felt her lips twitch. "I thought," James said carefully, "that perhaps we could spend the morning together. There's a stable I mentioned, if you're still interested in seeing the horses. And afterward, perhaps a walk through the gardens." "Can we, Mama, please?" Rose wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain distance, to protect herself and Samuel from getting too comfortable in a world they'd inevitably have to leave. But Samuel's eyes were shining with hope, and she'd already promised herself she wouldn't use him as a weapon in whatever complicated emotional battle she and James were fighting. "All right," she said, "but just the morning. Samuel needs a nap after lunch." "I do not need naps anymore," Samuel protested. "I'm almost 6. You fell asleep before supper yesterday." "That was different. That was because of all the shouting." James winced. "I am sorry about that. Truly, adults sometimes forget that little people have ears. It's okay. Mama says grown-ups are often foolish. She says it's not my job to fix them." Rose felt heat creep up her neck. "Samuel." "I don't think it's true, though," James said, his eyes meeting Rose's with something that might have been amusement. "Grown-ups are often quite foolish. Your mother is very wise." The morning room door opened before Rose could respond. Lady Helena Blackwell swept in, dressed in a morning gown that probably cost more than Rose would earn in 5 years. Her eyes swept over Rose's borrowed dress with an expression Rose couldn't quite read. "Good morning," Helena said crisply. "I trust you slept well, Miss Hayes." "Very well, thank you." Helena's gaze dropped to Samuel, and something in her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And you, young man? I trust your accommodations were satisfactory." Samuel, who had no concept of being intimidated by duchesses, beamed at her. "The rocking horse is beautiful. Did you know about the rocking horse?" "I did. It belonged to your father when he was a boy." Samuel's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And the toy soldiers were his as well? I thought you might enjoy them." Rose felt her throat tighten. Helena had prepared Samuel's room knowing, or at least suspecting, that a grandchild might exist. Despite her harsh words yesterday, despite intercepting the letters, she'd done this one small kindness. "Thank you," Rose said quietly. Helena nodded once, accepting the gratitude without comment. "James, a word about the household arrangements. Can it wait? We were just about to go to the stables." "It can wait an hour, but there are matters we need to discuss privately." The emphasis on that last word made it clear Rose and Samuel were being dismissed. Rose stood immediately. "Actually, I realized I need to write a letter to my landlady in Bath, explaining why we've been delayed. Perhaps Samuel and I should do that first." "Nonsense," Helena interrupted. "James can take the boy to the stables. You and I need to speak as well." Rose's stomach dropped. "We do? We do. James, take your son. Show him the horses. Miss Hayes and I will join you shortly." It wasn't a request. James looked between his mother and Rose, clearly torn. "It's all right," Rose said, though her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Go ahead. Are you sure?" "No." "Yes." Samuel took James's offered hand without hesitation, already chattering about which horse he hoped to see first. Rose watched them leave, her son's small hand swallowed by his father's larger one, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet again. When the door closed, Helena turned to Rose with an expression that was impossible to read. "Sit," she said. Rose sat. Helena remained standing, which meant Rose had to tilt her head back to meet her eyes. A power play, subtle but effective. "Let me be clear about something, Miss Hayes," Helena began. "I do not like this situation. I do not like that my son's wedding was destroyed. I do not like that a child I knew nothing about has suddenly appeared, upending carefully laid plans and alliances. And I most certainly do not like feeling as though I'm being manipulated by my dead husband's romantic notions. Rose kept her voice level. I didn't ask for any of this. Perhaps not. But you're here nonetheless, and that boy is my grandson, whether I like it or not. Whether you like it or not, Rose repeated, anger sparking. He's a child, not a problem to be managed. In this world, Miss Hayes, children of uncertain parentage are very much problems to be managed. The scandal alone. Then let us leave. Samuel and I can be on a train to Bath this afternoon. You can tell everyone we were distant cousins who visited briefly. Problem solved. Helena's eyes narrowed. And deprive James of his son. After he's only just discovered him. You seemed perfectly content to deprive him for the past 6 years. The words hung in the air like drawn swords. I did what I thought was best for my son, Helena said, her voice arctic. I will not apologize for that. I'm not asking you to, but I won't apologize for protecting mine either. They stared at each other. Two women from different worlds, each defending their child in their own way. Finally, Helena spoke. You're stronger than I expected. That's useful. Useful for what? For surviving what's coming. Helena moved to the window, looking out at the gardens. Lady Rosalind is still in residence. She's hurt and angry and looking for someone to blame. That someone will be you. I can handle Lady Rosalind. Can you? She's been raised in this world, Miss Hayes. She knows its rules, its weapons, its weaknesses. Do you? Rose had no answer to that. I thought not, Helena said, which is why I'm going to help you. Help me. Rose couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Don't mistake this for affection. I'm helping you because that boy is a Blackwell, my grandson, and Blackwells do not cower or hide. If he's to be part of this family, and it seems he will be whether I approve or not, then he needs a mother who won't be eaten alive by society within a week. How generous of you. Helena turned from the window, and for the first time, Rose saw something that might have been respect in her eyes. You're not what I expected, Helena said. Doru, when James spoke of you 6 years ago, yes, he spoke of you, though I pretended not to notice. I assumed you were some naive girl with romantic notions, but you've raised a well-mannered, cheerful child alone for 5 years. That takes more than romantic notions. That takes steel. Rose didn't know how to respond to what might have been a compliment. So here's what's going to happen, Helena continued. You will remain in residence. You will comport yourself as a lady of this household. You will learn what you need to learn about navigating society, and in return, I will ensure that Samuel is recognized as James's son, with all the protections that entails. And what do you get out of this arrangement? A grandson who isn't destroyed by scandal before he turns 6. And perhaps, Helena paused, something flickering across her face. Perhaps a chance to not repeat every mistake I made with my own son. Before Rose could process that admission, the door burst open. Lady Rosalind stood in the doorway, dressed in a morning gown of pale pink that should have made her look soft, but somehow only made her look more dangerous. How cozy, Rosalind said, her voice dripping venom. The Dowager Duchess and the interloper, plotting together. Should I be concerned? You should knock before entering a room, Helena said coldly. This is my future home. I'll enter as I please. Is it your future home? I wasn't aware the wedding had been rescheduled. Rosalind's smile was sharp as glass. It hasn't, but it will be. As soon as James comes to his senses and realizes he's been taken in by a very clever performance. She crossed the room, circling Rose like a predator. You're good, I'll give you that. The timing, the child conveniently the right age, even the touching little scene yesterday. I didn't know it was his wedding. Very convincing. It was the truth, Rose said evenly. Was it? Or did you plan this for months? Track down the mysterious father of your bastard, discover he'd become a duke, and decide to secure your future through manipulation? Rosalind, Helena warned. No, let her finish, Rose said, standing to face Rosalind directly. I'd like to hear all the accusations before I respond. Rosalind's eyes glittered. You want accusations? Fine. I think you're a fortune hunter who saw an opportunity and took it. I think that child might not even be James's, just convenient that he has similar coloring. I think you're counting on James's guilt and his father's manipulative letter to secure yourself a very comfortable position. Are you finished? For now. Rose took a breath, fighting to keep her voice calm. I received a mysterious invitation. I came out of curiosity. I had no idea James would be there. I've asked for nothing. Not money, not position, not even acknowledgement of Samuel. All I've done is exist, which apparently is a crime in your eyes. How convenient that your existence destroyed my wedding. Your wedding was a farce. The words burst out before Rose could stop them. James doesn't love you. You don't love him. It was a business arrangement dressed up in white lace. At least have the honesty to admit that. Rosalind's hand flew up, and Rose braced for a slap. Enough! Helena's voice cracked like a whip. Rosalind's hand froze mid-air. Slowly, she lowered it, but her eyes promised murder. If you strike her, Helena said quietly, you will never be welcome in this house again, wedding or no wedding. She insulted me. She told you the truth. There's a difference. Rosalind turned on Helena, betrayal written across her face. You're taking her side. I'm taking reality's side. You and James were never a love match. Everyone knew it. The arrangement made sense politically and financially. But love? Helena shook her head. No, there was never love. Love isn't necessary for a successful marriage. Perhaps not. But its absence makes it much harder to weather scandals. Like, for instance, the sudden appearance of your husband's illegitimate child. Rosalind's face went white, then red. So that's it. You're just accepting this. I'm accepting that the boy exists, that he's James's son, that denying it would be both futile and cruel. What about cruelty to me? I was standing at that altar. I was the one humiliated. For the first time, Helena's expression softened slightly. I know, and I am sorry for that, Rosalind, truly. You deserve better than what happened yesterday. Then fix it. Make her leave. Make this all go away. I can't. None of us can. The truth is out now. All we can do is manage it. Rosalind stared at Helena, then at Rose, her chest heaving. I won't accept this. I won't just step aside for her. No one is asking you to step aside, Helena said carefully. The wedding is postponed, not cancelled. James will make his own decision about his future. But Rosalind, if you want any hope of that future including you, then perhaps acting like a wounded animal isn't the best strategy. It was, Rose realized, actually good advice. Delivered coldly, but good nonetheless. Rosalind seemed to realize it too. Her expression shifted, calculation replacing raw fury. You're right, she said, her voice controlled now. I'm being emotional. Understandable, given the circumstances, but not productive. She turned to Rose, and her smile was pleasant and absolutely terrifying. Miss Hayes, I apologize for my outburst. This has been difficult for all of us. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Rose said warily. Perhaps we could start over. I'd love to hear more about young Samuel. James's son deserves to be known, don't you think? Every instinct Rose had screamed that this was a trap. But before she could respond, the door opened again. Samuel ran in, eyes bright with excitement. James following behind with a smile Rose remembered from 6 years ago. Mama, I met the horses. There's one called Tempest, who's black as night, and one called Moonbeam, who let me pet her nose, and father says tomorrow I can learn to ride if you say it's okay. And can I please? The room went silent. Samuel looked around, confused by the tension. Did I interrupt something? Not at all, Rosalind said sweetly. We were just talking about you. What a lovely boy you are. She approached Samuel with that same pleasant smile, and Rose's hands clenched into fists. You must be very proud to have learned you have a duke for a father, Rosalind continued. That must make you feel quite special. Samuel frowned, thinking, I guess so. I'm more excited about the horses, really. Despite everything, Rose felt her lips twitch, her son, the pragmatist. Rosalind's smile tightened infinitesimally. Of course, horses are wonderful. Tell me, Samuel, has your mother told you much about your father? Before yesterday, I mean. Rosalind, James said warningly, I'm just curious. It must have been difficult, Miss Hayes, explaining to a child why he didn't have a father. What did you tell him? Rose felt the trap closing. Whatever she said could be twisted, used against her. I told him, Rose said carefully, that his father was a good man who didn't know he existed, and that if he did know, he would have loved him very much. How optimistic of you. Rosalind, that's enough, James said sharply. I'm simply making conversation. No, you're picking a fight using a 5-year-old child. It's beneath you. Rosalind's mask slipped for just a moment, showing the fury underneath. Then she composed herself. You're right. I apologize. Again, she looked at Helena. If you'll excuse me, I have correspondence to attend to. She swept from the room with the grace of someone who'd been trained since birth to make an exit. After she left, Samuel tugged on Rose's dress. Mama, I don't think that lady likes us very much. It's complicated, sweetheart. You always say that when you don't want to explain. James laughed, surprising them all. He has you there. Samuel looked up at his father. Can we go see the library now? You promised. I did indeed. Shall we? Samuel took James's hand again, and they headed for the door. Rose moved to follow, but Helena's voice stopped her. Miss Hayes, her word. Rose turned back reluctantly. Helena waited until James and Samuel were out of earshot, then said quietly, You handled that well, better than I expected. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't rise to her bait. You answered honestly without being defensive. That was smart. Helena paused. But she's not finished. This was just the opening salvo. I gathered that. Good. Stay alert. And Miss Hayes. Helena's eyes met hers. I meant what I said. I will help you navigate this world. Not because I like you, but because that boy deserves better than to be caught between warring adults. Do we understand each other? Rose considered the woman who'd intercepted her letters, who'd destroyed her chance at happiness 6 years ago, who was now offering to help her survive in a world Rose didn't understand. We understand each other, Rose said finally. Helena nodded once. Then go. James and the boy will be waiting. The library was everything Samuel had dreamed and more. 3 stories of books, with a spiral staircase connecting them all. Leather-bound volumes in burgundy and forest green and midnight blue. A ladder on rails that rolled along the shelves. Windows that let in golden afternoon light. Comfortable chairs clustered around a massive fireplace. Samuel stood in the doorway, literally open-mouthed. It's like a castle, he breathed. It's in a castle made of books, James smiled. Do you like to read? Mama's been teaching me. I can read all the words in my picture books now, and some of the words in her books, though she says I'm not old enough for those yet. What kind of stories do you like? Adventures, with dragons and knights and magic, and animals that can talk. And Samuel ran to one of the shelves, trailing his hand along the spines. Are all these books yours? They belong to the family, which means they belong to you too now. Samuel turned, eyes wide. Really? All of them? All of them? Even the ones I can't read yet, especially those ones. You'll grow into them. Rose watched from the doorway as James pulled down books to show Samuel, explaining their stories in ways that made the boy's eyes light up. Watched as Samuel asked his 1,000 questions, and James answered each one with patience and genuine interest. This was what she'd stolen from them, she realized, or what had been stolen from them. The blame was complicated, shared among too many people. But regardless of whose fault it was, here was the truth. James was a good father, natural at it, in a way some men never managed even with years of practice. Samuel needed this, deserved this, and that meant Rose needed to find a way to make this work, even though every instinct told her to run before anyone could hurt them again. Mama, look! Samuel held up a book almost as big as he was. It has pictures of all the horses in the world. Not all the horses, James corrected, smiling, but many of them. Would you like to take it to your room, to look at before bed? Can I really? Of course. Samuel clutched the book like treasure. Then, impulsively, he threw his free arm around James's leg in an awkward hug. Thank you, he said simply, for the horses and the books and being nice to Mama. James looked down at the child, clinging to him, with an expression of wonder and terror and love all mixed together. His eyes met Rose's across the room, and in them she saw a question. Is this all right? Am I doing this right? Rose nodded. Because whatever else was true, whatever complicated history lay between them, this moment was right. This was what fathers and sons were supposed to look like. James knelt down, returning Samuel's hug properly. Thank you for giving me a chance to know you. You're the best thing I never knew I had. Samuel pulled back, studying his father's face with the seriousness only children could manage. You look sad when you smile. Why? Because I'm happy and sad at the same time. Happy that you're here. Sad that I missed so much. That's okay, Samuel said matter-of-factly. You can't change yesterday. Mama says you can only choose what to do with today. Rose felt her throat close. Those were her words, from a night when Samuel was 4 and crying because he'd broken his favorite toy and couldn't fix it. James looked at her again, and this time there was something raw in his expression. You raised him to be kind, his eyes seemed to say. You raised him to forgive. Thank you. Before the moment could become too heavy, Samuel yawned hugely. Someone needs his nap, Rose said. I told you, I don't need naps. Another yawn cut him off. Perhaps just a short rest, James suggested. so you'll have energy to see more horses tomorrow. Well, if it's for the horses, Samuel conceded. They walked back to the blue suite together, Samuel chattering about everything he'd seen, his steps already slowing with exhaustion. By the time they reached Rose's rooms, he was nearly falling asleep on his feet. Rose carried him to his bed, removed his shoes, pulled a light blanket over him. He was asleep before she finished tucking him in. When she returned to the main room, James was still there, standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. "He's remarkable," James said without turning. "Truly remarkable. You've done such a good job with him, Rose." "I did what any mother would do." "No, you did more. You raised him alone, with no help, no support, no resources, and you raised him to be kind and curious and forgiving. That's not something any mother can do. That's extraordinary." Rose didn't know what to say to that. Pride and exhaustion and old pain all warred within her. James turned to face her. "I know you're not ready to forgive me, or my mother, or this whole impossible situation, but I want you to know that I see what you've done. I see the sacrifice, and I'm grateful. Gratitude doesn't change the past." "No, but perhaps it can shape the future." "What future, James? We can't stay here indefinitely. We have a life in Bath. I have work, had work. I'll probably lose my position for disappearing without notice. And Samuel has his routine, his few friends, his normal life. What if he could have this life too? This isn't his life, it's yours. He's my son. That makes it his life too." Rose shook her head. "You can't just claim him because it's convenient, because you've discovered you like being a father. There are consequences, James. For him, for me, for your precious reputation and alliances. I don't care about my reputation. You should, because Samuel will care about his. Children are cruel to those who are different, and a duke's bastard son, he'll be torn apart. Unless I legitimize him." Rose's breath caught. "What?" "I can petition to have him legitimized, recognized as my legal heir. It's rare, but it can be done, especially for—" He stopped himself. "Especially for what? Especially for dukes with too much influence. Men who can buy their way around inconvenient laws. Especially for children who deserve better than the circumstances of their birth. Rose, he's my son, and I want him to have everything he's entitled to. He's not entitled to anything. He's entitled to a childhood where he's not constantly reminded that he's different, wrong, lesser. He won't be, won't he?" Rose's voice rose. "You think because you signed some papers, society will just forget. We'll stop whispering about the bastard who somehow inherited a title. We'll stop treating him like he's permanently contaminated. Then marry me." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Rose stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What? Marry me?" James repeated. "We'll say we were married 6 years ago, secretly, before my father died. We'll say we separated due to family pressure, but never divorced. We'll say—" "We'll lie," Rose interrupted flatly. "We'll protect our son by building his entire life on a lie, by giving him legitimacy. He already has legitimacy. He has a mother who loves him, and a childhood filled with honesty and poverty." James's voice cracked. "Rose, please, I'm not trying to insult you, but I've seen your dress. I know you're living in lodging houses. I know you're working yourself to exhaustion just to survive. Let me help. Let me give you both the life you deserve. We don't deserve a life built on lies, and I won't teach Samuel that lying is acceptable when it's convenient. It's not about convenience. Then what's it about, James? Guilt? Obligation? Because those are terrible foundations for a marriage. What about love?" he said quietly. Rose felt her heart stutter. "What? I loved you. 6 years ago. I loved you so much I was willing to defy my mother, give up my inheritance, run away to Scotland if that's what it took. And then my father died, and I thought you'd abandoned me. And I buried it. But Rose," he took a step toward her, "seeing you again, seeing what you've become, how strong you are, how you've raised our son to be kind and brave and wonderful, I think I might still love you." Rose backed away, shaking her head. "No, don't do that. Don't romanticize this. I'm not—" "You are. You're remembering a girl who doesn't exist anymore. I'm not the naive music teacher you knew. I've been abandoned, betrayed, forced to survive on my own. I've had to lie to landlords about Samuel's father. I've had to endure whispers and judgment and pity. I've had to make impossible choices every single day. The girl you loved, she died 6 years ago. Then let me know the woman she became. Why? So you can ease your guilt, So you can play father when it suits you and ship us back to Bath when society gets too uncomfortable. That's not fair. Fair? Rose laughed, high and slightly hysterical. You want to talk about fair? Fine. It's not fair that I raised our son alone. It's not fair that your mother intercepted our letters. It's not fair that I have to watch Samuel's face light up around you, knowing you can be ripped away from him at any moment. Nothing about this is fair, James. Samuel's voice came from the connecting room, frightened and small. Mama! Rose and James both froze. Rose went to the doorway. Samuel was sitting up in bed, his face crumpled with worry. Why are you shouting again? He asked, tears welling in his eyes. Rose's heart broke. She went to him immediately, sitting on the bed and pulling him close. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. We weren't shouting at you. But you were shouting, and you sound scared. Are we leaving? No, we're not leaving, not today. Promise. Rose hesitated, unwilling to make a promise she might not be able to keep, but Samuel's eyes were so wide, so frightened that she heard herself say, I promise. We're staying for a while. James appeared in the doorway, and Samuel looked at him with the same fearful expression. Janet, are you and Mama fighting because of me? No. Both adults said it simultaneously. James entered the room slowly, sitting carefully on the opposite side of the bed. We're not fighting because of you, James said gently. We're fighting because grown-ups sometimes have disagreements about complicated things, but none of it is your fault. Do you understand? Samuel sniffled. I don't want you to fight. I know. We'll try to be quieter. Not quieter. Not fight at all. James and Rose looked at each other over Samuel's head, an impossible request from a child who didn't understand how much hurt and history stood between them. But looking at their son's tear-stained face, Rose found herself saying, We'll try, I promise we'll try. Samuel settled back against his pillows, seemingly satisfied. Okay, but Mama. Yes, sweetheart. I like it here. I like the horses and the books and having a father. Can we stay? Please. And there it was. The question Rose had been dreading, because the answer was yes. They could stay, at least for a while. Samuel deserved to know his father, deserved to experience this world, even if it wouldn't be permanent. But staying meant risking more pain, more complicated entanglements, more chances for Samuel and Rose to get attached to a life they'd eventually have to leave. Still, looking at her son's hopeful face, Rose couldn't bring herself to say no. We'll stay for a while, she said carefully. But Samuel, this isn't our permanent home. You understand that, right? We're visitors, but we could stay forever if we wanted to. That's complicated. There's that word again, Samuel said, but he was smiling now. James reached out, hesitating, then gently ruffled Samuel's hair. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll have more adventures. Promise. Promise. After Samuel settled back to sleep, Rose and James stood in the doorway, watching him. I meant what I said, James said quietly. About wanting to know the woman you've become. About there being something still there between us. There's nothing between us but a child and 6 years of hurt. Is there? Or are you just afraid to find out if there might be more? Rose didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because he might be right, and that terrified her more than anything else. I should go, James said finally. But Rose, think about what I said, about legitimizing him, about giving him a future that doesn't involve whispers and shame. And marriage, should I think about that too? Only if you want to. I won't force anything on you, but the offer stands. For Samuel's sake, if not for ours. After he left, Rose stood at the window watching the sun set over gardens that would never belong to her. Somewhere in this house, Rosalind was plotting, Helena was calculating, and James was probably torturing himself with guilt and impossible dreams. And Rose was trying to figure out how to protect her son from a world that would judge him for circumstances beyond his control. She thought of James's offer, marriage, legitimacy, a life of comfort and security. All it would cost was her honesty, her pride, and possibly her heart. The next 3 days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Mornings belonged to Samuel and James. They visited the stables, where Samuel was learning to ride a gentle mare named Clover. They explored the grounds, the lake, the old folly, the kitchen gardens where Samuel discovered he loved fresh strawberries. They spent hours in the library, James reading to Samuel or watching with quiet wonder as the boy pored over picture books. Rose watched these moments from a careful distance, her heart pulled in directions she didn't want to examine too closely. Samuel was blossoming under his father's attention, The boy who'd been content with their small life in Bath now laughed more freely, asked bigger questions, dreamed larger dreams. It was beautiful and terrifying, because eventually this would end. It had to. And when it did, Samuel would have to return to their ordinary life, carrying memories of horses and libraries, and a father who'd shown him what it meant to be loved by someone with unlimited resources and time. The afternoons were worse. That's when the household gathered for tea in the drawing room, a ritual Helena insisted upon with the iron will of someone who believed proper society could solve any problem. Rose, Samuel, James, Helena, and Rosalind, 5 people in a room designed for pleasant conversation, each carrying enough tension to shatter crystal. The first afternoon, tea had been almost civilized. Rosalind had been coolly polite, asking Samuel bland questions about his education and making observations about the weather. Helena had maintained order with the skill of a general commanding troops. James had tried to act normal, while clearly dying inside. The second afternoon had been when cracks began to show. Such a well-behaved child, Rosalind had said, watching Samuel carefully eat a biscuit. You must have been quite strict with him, Miss Hayes, given your limited resources. I taught him manners, Rose had replied evenly. Resources have nothing to do with kindness. Of course not, though proper education does help. Tell me, Samuel, can you read? Yes, ma'am. Mama taught me. How lovely. And mathematics. Latin. The classics. Samuel had looked confused. I'm 5. Almost 6. Rosalind corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 6, most children of quality are already beginning their formal education. But I suppose circumstances were different for you. Rosalind, James had said sharply. I'm merely pointing out that the boy has gaps in his education, nothing that couldn't be remedied, one of course, with the proper tutors and environment. The implication had been clear. Samuel needed to be separated from Rose's inadequate influence. Rose had gripped her teacup so hard she'd nearly cracked it. Now, on the 4th afternoon, Rose sat in the drawing room, waiting for whatever fresh torture Rosalind had planned. Samuel was upstairs napping, a concession he still made when exhausted from morning adventures. James hadn't yet arrived. It was just Rose, Helena, and Rosalind. The Dowager Duchess was working on embroidery, her needle moving with mechanical precision. Rosalind was reading a letter, though her eyes kept flicking to Rose with predatory interest. I had the most interesting correspondence this morning, Rosalind said, setting down her letter. From Lady Pemberton. You wouldn't know her, Miss Hayes, but she's quite influential in society, knows everyone, hears everything. Rose said nothing, recognizing a trap. Heidi, she was asking about the cousin from Bath, who'd arrived so unexpectedly. Apparently, the servants have been talking. Servants always talk, Helena said without looking up from her embroidery. Indeed, which is why it's so important to control the narrative, don't you think? Rosalind smiled pleasantly. Lady Pemberton was quite curious about young Samuel. Such a distinctive child. Those remarkable eyes. That unusual colouring. What's your point, Rosalind? Helena's needle paused. My point is that people aren't stupid. They see a child who looks exactly like James. They remember that the wedding was suddenly postponed. They're drawing conclusions. Let them draw conclusions, Helena said crisply. Speculation isn't fact. Perhaps not. But enough speculation becomes its own truth, doesn't it? Rosalind turned to Rose. Tell me, Miss Hayes, how do you think Samuel will feel when he's old enough to understand what people are saying about him? When other children refuse to play with him because their parents have deemed him unsuitable company? Rose's hands clenched in her lap. Samuel is a child. A kind, innocent child who's done nothing wrong. Of course he hasn't. But society doesn't care about innocence. It cares about propriety, legitimacy, bloodlines that can be traced through proper channels. Rosalind's voice remained sweet, but her eyes were cold. Your son will always be marked by the circumstances of his birth, unless, of course, steps were taken to legitimize the situation. Steps such as, Rose asked, though she knew where this was going, marriage, naturally, a proper wedding, James, doing the honourable thing. Rosalind paused delicately. Of course, that would require dissolving his current engagement first, which brings us back to our little impasse, doesn't it? There is no engagement, Rose said. The wedding was postponed. Postponed, not cancelled. An important distinction. Is it? Because it seems to me that a man who was genuinely committed to marrying you wouldn't be spending every waking moment with another woman's child. Rosalind's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, showing the rage beneath. That child is the only reason James is confused. Remove the child from the equation, and everything becomes clear again. Remove the child. Rose's voice dropped dangerously low. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that perhaps young Samuel would be better served by attending a proper school, away from Blackwell Manor, away from the complicated emotions and adult conflicts. Somewhere he could receive a gentleman's education, make appropriate friends, learn to navigate society without his mother's limitations. Rose stood abruptly, her teacup clattering. You want to send him away, to separate us. I want what's best for everyone, including Samuel. Rosalind stood as well, abandoning any pretense of pleasantness. You can't give him what he needs, Miss Hayes. Not really. You can give him love, certainly. No one doubts that. But love doesn't teach Latin. Love doesn't open doors in society. Love doesn't erase the stain of illegitimacy. That's enough, Helena said, setting down her embroidery with a decisive snap. Both younger women turned to her. Helena stood, her posture rigid with authority. Rosalind, you will cease this line of conversation immediately. I'm only being practical. You're being cruel. There's a difference. Helena's eyes were ice. That child is my grandson, my blood, and I will not tolerate anyone, including you, suggesting he be shipped off like an inconvenient problem. Rosalind's jaw dropped. But Your Grace, you yourself said, I said many things in the heat of shock and anger. I'm saying something different now. That boy stays here, with his mother, for as long as they choose to remain. You can't be serious. After everything we've planned, everything our families agreed, plans change, families adapt. That's how we survive. Helena turned to Rose, and something in her expression had softened. Miss Hayes, would you check on Samuel? He should be waking soon. It was a dismissal, but a kind one. Rose fled gratefully, her hands shaking with suppressed rage and something that might have been gratitude. Behind her, she heard Rosalind's voice rise. You're choosing her. After everything I've... The door closed, cutting off the rest. Rose leaned against the corridor wall, breathing hard. Her heart was racing, her mind was spinning. Helena had defended her, had defended Samuel, had made it clear that they were under her protection. But protection from a woman who'd intercepted letters and destroyed lives 6 years ago felt like a sword with two edges. Rose. She looked up. James was walking down the corridor, still in his riding clothes, his hair wind-blown and his face concerned. What happened? You look pale. Your mother just defended me to Rosalind, defended Samuel. James blinked. She did. Rosalind suggested sending Samuel away to school, to separate us. And your mother, Rose's voice caught. She said no, said he was her grandson and would stay here as long as we wanted. Something complex crossed James's face. She's changing, or she's manipulating us. I can't tell which. Does it matter if the outcome is the same? Rose laughed without humor. Everything matters, James. Motives, intentions, the reasons people do things, because those are what predict what they'll do next. James moved closer, and Rose caught the scent of horses and leather and outdoors, a combination that reminded her painfully of 6 years ago, when everything had been simple and possible. What do you think she'll do next? He asked quietly. I don't know, but I know what Rosalind will do. She's going to escalate, push harder, try to force a crisis. Then let her. I'm done pretending this engagement is real. Rose met his eyes. Are you? Because ending it officially means scandal, means society talking, means everything you've been trying to avoid. I don't care about scandal. You should, for Samuel's sake, if not your own. For Samuel's sake, I should end this farce and acknowledge him properly, legitimize him, give him my name. We've been through this, and my position hasn't changed. He's my son. I want him to have everything he deserves. What he deserves, Rose said tiredly, is a childhood free from being a pawn in adult games. What he deserves is to not be the reason for scandal and gossip and broken engagements. He's not the reason I am. My choices, my refusal to settle for a loveless marriage when I have a son who needs me and a woman who... He stopped. A woman who what? Rose asked, her heart beating too fast. James looked at her with such intensity she had to fight not to look away. A woman who still makes me feel like I'm 22 and discovering what love actually means. Rose's breath caught. James, don't. Why not? Because it's inconvenient. Because it complicates things. Everything's already complicated, Rose. At least let me be honest about what I feel. What you feel is guilt and obligation and nostalgia for a simpler time. Is that what you think? I don't know what to think. 6 years, James. 6 years of raising our son alone, of making every decision by myself, of building a life that didn't include you. And now you're here, being perfect with Samuel, saying these things, and her voice broke. I can't trust this, can't trust you. Because what happens when it gets hard? When society cuts you? When maintaining this fantasy costs too much? Will you stand by us then? Or will you choose duty over love again? I wouldn't. You already did. You chose duty when your father died, when your mother said I wasn't suitable, when you let weeks turn into months without fighting to come back. I thought you'd abandoned me, because you were too willing to believe it. The words burst out before Rose could stop them, because some part of you was relieved. Relieved that you didn't have to choose, that the decision was made for you. James recoiled like she'd struck him. That's not fair, isn't it? Be honest, James. If you'd gotten my letters, if you'd known I was pregnant, would you have really defied your mother, given up everything? Or would you have done the responsible thing and offered me money to go away quietly? I would have married you, out of duty, out of love. Prove it. Rose's voice echoed down the corridor. Don't tell me pretty words about still having feelings. Don't make promises about the future. Prove that you can choose us when it costs you something real. Before James could respond, a door opened. Rosalind stood in the doorway of the drawing room, her face flushed, her eyes bright with tears and fury. How touching, she said, her voice shaking. Please, don't let me interrupt your passionate declarations. She swept past them, her skirts snapping, and disappeared up the stairs. James closed his eyes. This is a disaster. This has always been a disaster. We've just been pretending otherwise. Rose turned to go, but James caught her arm gently. Rose. Wait, please. She stopped but didn't turn around. You want me to prove it? Fine. I'll end the engagement. Officially. Today, I'll face whatever scandal comes. I'll legitimize Samuel. I'll do whatever it takes. And if that's not enough, if society still treats him as lesser, if your precious reputation is destroyed, if Helena decides we're too much trouble after all, then we'll face it together. Rose did turn then, and the earnestness in his face made her throat ache. You can't promise that. You don't know what's coming. Neither do you. But at least I'm willing to try. Before Rose could answer, a scream split the air. Samuel's scream. Rose ran. James was right behind her. They burst into the blue suite to find Samuel sitting up in bed, sobbing. Mrs. Harper trying to comfort him. What happened? Rose demanded, rushing to her son. A nightmare, miss, Mrs. Harper said, her weathered face concerned. He woke crying and wouldn't let me touch him. Samuel launched himself at Rose, wrapping his arms around her neck with desperate strength. Mama, I dreamed you left. You left me here and I couldn't find you and everyone said you weren't coming back. Rose's heart shattered. She held him tight, stroking his hair, making soothing sounds. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise. But you and Father were fighting. I heard you. Even in my sleep, I heard you fighting. Rose closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. They'd been too loud, too careless, and Samuel, already overwhelmed by all the changes, had absorbed their conflict into his dreams. We weren't fighting about you, she said firmly. Never about you. Do you understand? You are not the problem. You've never been the problem. Then why does everyone seem angry all the time? It was such a simple, devastating question. James knelt beside the bed, his face stricken. Samuel, I'm sorry, so sorry. The grown-ups in this house have been handling things badly. But you're the best thing here. The only thing that makes sense. Samuel looked at his father with wet eyes. Really, you're smart and kind and brave. And even when everything else is complicated, that's simple and true. I don't feel brave. I feel scared. Being scared and being brave aren't opposites, James said gently. Being brave means being scared and doing the thing anyway. Samuel considered this, his sobs quieting. Say, are you scared? Terrified, Moss, of what? Of failing you, of not being the father you deserve, of losing the chance to know you better. Rose felt tears burn her own eyes. She'd been so focused on protecting Samuel from disappointment that she hadn't considered that James might be just as afraid. You're not failing, Samuel said seriously. You're teaching me about horses and books. That's good fathering. Despite everything, James laughed. So I'm glad you think so. Samuel yawned hugely, the emotional storm draining his energy. Will you stay, both of you, until I fall asleep again? Rose and James looked at each other over their son's head. Of course, Rose said. Absolutely, James added. They sat on either side of the bed, Samuel between them, each holding one of his hands. Mrs. Harper quietly left, closing the door behind her. As Samuel's breathing deepened back into sleep, Rose became acutely aware of James's presence, of how small Samuel looked between them, of how this, the three of them together, felt both right and impossible. Rose, James whispered, careful not to wake Samuel. I meant what I said. I'm ending the engagement, not because you asked, but because it's the right thing to do. Because I can't marry Rosalind while raising my son and still pretending to have any integrity. She'll make you pay for it. Let her try. Your mother will adjust, or she won't. But Samuel deserves better than to grow up watching his father live a lie. Rose looked down at their sleeping son, at his peaceful face, so different from the terror of his nightmare, at his hands, still clutching theirs even in sleep. What happens after? She asked quietly. After you end it? After the scandal? What then? Then we figure it out. Together. If you'll let me. I don't know if I can trust this. I know. But Rose, I'm going to spend however long it takes proving you can. Not with words. With actions. With choices. With showing up every single day and choosing you and Samuel over everything else. Rose wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to believe him. But belief was dangerous. Belief led to hope, and hope led to heartbreak. And she'd spent 6 years carefully constructing walls to protect herself from exactly this kind of pain. We should let him sleep, she said, instead of answering. They carefully extracted their hands from Samuel's grip, tucking him in properly. Rose stood to leave, but James caught her hand one more time. Tomorrow, he said. I'm speaking with Rosalind tomorrow, officially ending this. Just be prepared. She won't go quietly, I know. And Rose, after tomorrow, after this is done, will you at least think about staying? Really staying? Not as visitors, but as family. Rose pulled her hand free gently. Ask me again after you've faced the consequences of your choice. After you know what it really costs. Then maybe I'll have an answer. She left him standing in Samuel's room, watching their son sleep, and retreated to her own chamber where she could finally let herself cry, because she wanted to say yes, wanted to believe in second chances and redemption and love that survived 6 years of separation. But wanting and trusting were different things, and Rose had learned the hard way that trust, once broken, was far harder to rebuild than love. The next morning, the entire household knew something was about to happen. The servants whispered in corners. Helena's breakfast was brought to her private rooms, an unusual break from routine. Samuel sensed the tension and stayed close to Rose, unusually quiet. And Rosalind. Rosalind was nowhere to be seen. James had requested her presence in the library at 10 o'clock. It was now 2:15, and she still hadn't appeared. Rose waited in her room with Samuel, ostensibly to give James privacy, but really because she couldn't bear to watch, to see Rosalind's face when her future was officially destroyed, because despite everything, despite the cruelty, the manipulation, the thinly veiled threats, Rose couldn't quite hate her. Rosalind was doing what she'd been trained to do, secure her position, protect her interests, fight for what she believed was rightfully hers. The only problem was that what was rightfully hers was a man who'd never really belonged to her at all. A knock at the door made Rose jump. Come in. Mrs. Harper entered, her face grave. Miss Hayes, His Grace requests your presence in the library immediately. Rose's stomach dropped. Why, I thought he was speaking with Lady Rosalind privately. Lady Rosalind has made some demands. His Grace thought you should be present. This couldn't be good. Rose looked at Samuel, who was playing quietly with his toy soldiers. Stay here, sweetheart. Mrs. Harper will stay with you. Is something wrong, Mama? I don't know yet. The walk to the library felt like walking to an execution. Rose's palms were sweating. Her heart was racing. Every instinct screamed danger. She found the library occupied by 4 people. James, standing stiff-backed near the fireplace. Helena, seated with rigid posture. Lord Sheffield, looking uncomfortable. And Rosalind, perfectly composed in a chair, her hands folded in her lap and a small smile on her face. That smile terrified Rose more than any of Rosalind's previous rage. Miss Hayes, Rosalind said pleasantly. How kind of you to join us. Rose looked at James, searching his face for clues. He looked furious and helpless in equal measure. "What's going on?" Rose asked. "James has informed me that he wishes to end our engagement," Rosalind said, her voice still pleasant. "Naturally, I'm devastated. However, I'm willing to be reasonable about this." "Reasonable," Rose repeated flatly. "Indeed, I understand that James feels an obligation to his son. It's commendable, really. Fatherly instinct is so admirable." Rosalind's smile widened. "So I'm proposing a compromise." Rose's hands clenched. "What kind of compromise?" "The engagement ends. James is free to acknowledge young Samuel, provide for him financially, ensure his education and future. I'll even withdraw quietly, claim the separation was mutual, save everyone from scandal." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it was. "In exchange for what?" Rose asked. "In exchange for you and Samuel returning to Bath, permanently." The room went silent. "Absolutely not," James said immediately. "Let me finish," Rosalind continued, still smiling. "You'd return to Bath. James would support you both generously, enough to live comfortably, educate the boy properly, ensure you never want for anything. He could visit, regularly if he wishes, just discreetly." "You want us hidden," Rose said, her voice hollow. "I want everyone to have what they need. James keeps his son and his reputation. You keep your independence and financial security. Samuel receives every advantage without the burden of scandal, and I—" Rosalind's mask slipped slightly. "I salvage what's left of my dignity and find a husband who actually wants to marry me." It was, Rose realized with sick horror, actually logical, clean, practical, everything except what Samuel needed most. His father, fully present, not relegated to occasional visits. "No," Rose said. "Think about it rationally." "I said no. I didn't spend 6 years raising Samuel alone just to accept him being hidden away like a shameful secret. Better a comfortable secret than a public scandal. Better an honest life than a comfortable lie." Rosalind's composure finally cracked. She stood abruptly. "You stupid, stupid woman, do you have any idea what you're condemning that child to? The whispers, the exclusion, the constant reminder that he's not quite legitimate, not quite acceptable. I know exactly what I'm condemning him to. I've lived it, but I'd rather he live it with his head held high than hidden in the shadows." "How noble," Rosalind sneered. "And when he's 10 and crying because no respectable family will let their children play with him? When he's 15 and realizes every door will be half closed to him? When he's 20 and can't marry anyone of quality because of the stain on his name? Will your pride comfort him then?" The words hit like arrows because they were Rose's own fears, spoken aloud by someone who knew exactly where to aim. "That's enough," James said, his voice dangerous. "Rose is right. I won't hide my son. I won't pretend he doesn't exist just to make society comfortable." "Then you're both fools," Rosalind said flatly. "And that child will pay for your foolishness." She moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back with one final strike. "You think you've won, don't you, Miss Hayes? You think James has chosen you and it's all going to work out like some romantic fairy tale. But here's what you don't understand about our world. We eat people like you. We chew you up and spit you out. And we'll do it to your son too, no matter how much James tries to protect him. Then we'll survive it," Rose said, even as fear coiled in her stomach. "Together. We'll see," Rosalind said softly. "We'll see how long your pretty ideals last when reality sets in." She left then, closing the door with deliberate care, somehow more ominous than if she'd slammed it. In the silence that followed, Rose felt her legs give out. She sank into a chair, shaking. "She's right," Rose whispered. "God help me, she's right." "No," James said immediately, kneeling beside her chair. "She's playing on your fears. She's speaking the truth. Samuel will be excluded, whispered about, judged, and we'll face it together. All 3 of us. You can't promise that. I can, and I am." James took her hands, his grip firm and warm. "Rose, look at me." She did, meeting his eyes with her own tear-filled ones. "Can I choose you?" James said clearly. "I choose Samuel. I choose this messy, complicated, difficult truth over any comfortable lie. And yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, people will talk. Yes, society might cut us. But I'm done caring more about society than about my own son. I'm done letting fear make my choices." "James," Helena spoke for the first time since Rose entered. "You understand what this means? The consequences?" "I do, truly. You understand that the Fairchilds will be offended, that their allies will take their side, that doors which were open to you will close. I understand, Mother. Helena was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Very well. If you're committed to this course, then we'll weather it properly. As a family. Rose's head snapped up. What? You heard me. If my grandson is to be acknowledged, he'll be acknowledged properly. With the full backing of this family and everything that entails. Helena's expression was unreadable. I won't have it said that the Blackwells abandoned their own blood. But you intercepted my letters. You kept us apart. I did, and I'm not apologizing for decisions I believed were correct at the time, but circumstances have changed. That boy is real, here, and undeniably my grandson. And whatever else I am, I'm not someone who abandons family when society turns its back. It wasn't an apology, wasn't even really an olive branch, but it was something. Thank you, Rose said quietly. Helena nodded once, then stood. Lord Sheffield, draft a statement. Something dignified acknowledging the child without excessive detail. We'll control the narrative before gossip does. Your Grace, are you certain? I'm never uncertain. Draft the statement. As Helena swept from the room, Lord Sheffield following, Rose and James were left alone. Did that really just happen? Rose asked. I think my mother just chose us over propriety. I'm as shocked as you are. Despite everything, Rose felt a laugh bubble up. What have we done? Started something that can't be undone. James was still kneeling beside her chair. Rose, I know you're scared. I know you have every reason not to trust this. But I'm asking you anyway, will you stay? Really stay? Not just for Samuel, but for us? For the possibility that maybe we can make this work? Rose looked at him. Really looked. At the man he'd become, weathered by responsibility and grief, and 6 years of living the wrong life. At the determination in his eyes, the set of his jaw that said he meant every word. She thought of Samuel, sleeping upstairs, finally having both parents in his life. She thought of 6 years of loneliness, of making every decision alone, of bearing every burden by herself. And she thought of the alternative, returning to Bath, to their small, safe life, with generous support and occasional visits, and the knowledge that she'd chosen safety over the possibility of something more. I need time, she said finally. Time to see if this is real. If you really can stand by those words when the consequences hit. If your mother really means what she says, if Samuel can actually thrive here, or if Rosalind was right about what's coming. How much time? I don't know. Weeks, maybe months. But James, if I stay, it's conditional. The moment I think this is hurting Samuel more than helping, we leave. No arguments, no negotiations. We leave. Fair enough. And I'm not. Rose took a breath. I'm not promising anything between us. Not romance, not marriage, not a future. I'm promising to let you be Samuel's father. That's all I can give right now. Something flickered in James's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or hurt. But he nodded. That's enough. For now, that's enough. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. Rose took it, letting him pull her to her feet. They stood close enough that Rose could see the exact moment when James made the decision not to kiss her, could see him deliberately step back, giving her the space she'd asked for. Should we tell Samuel? He asked. That we're staying? Let's see how the next few days unfold first. After Lord Sheffield's statement, after we see how society reacts. Practical as ever. Someone has to be. They left the library together, walking side by side, but not touching. And Rose tried not to think about how natural it felt, how right, to have him beside her. Tried not to think about how much it would hurt if this fell apart. Tried not to hope. But hope, she was discovering, was a stubborn, dangerous thing. Act 3. New Beginnings. Lord Sheffield's statement was released 3 days later. It was masterfully written, acknowledging Samuel's existence without excessive detail, confirming James's intention to provide for his son, and noting that the engagement to Lady Rosalind Fairchild had been mutually dissolved by both parties. The response was immediate and predictable. Half of society was scandalized, the other half was deliciously entertained, and everyone had an opinion about the Duke of Blackwell, his mysterious son, and the woman from Bath who'd appeared out of nowhere. Rose watched it unfold from the relative safety of Blackwell Manor, reading the society pages that Mrs. Harper discreetly brought her each morning. Some were kind. His Grace's honourable acknowledgement of his natural son shows admirable character. Most were not. One wonders what other secrets the Blackwell family has been hiding, and a few were vicious. Lady Rosalind Fairchild is well rid of a man who would elevate his base-born child above propriety. Through it all, James remained steady. He attended his club and endured the whispers. He managed estate business while doors that had been open began to close. He faced each consequence with his head high and his resolve unshaken. And every afternoon, he came to the nursery to spend time with Samuel, teaching him to ride, reading with him in the library, simply being present in ways that mattered more than grand gestures. Rose watched, waiting for him to break, to regret his choice, to show signs of the resentment Rosalind had predicted. It never came. 2 weeks after the statement, Helena summoned Rose to her private sitting room. Rose went prepared for confrontation, for demands, for the other shoe to finally drop. Instead, Helena gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. We need to discuss Samuel's future." Rose sat warily. "What about it?" "He needs proper education, tutors, training in deportment, languages, the skills he'll need to navigate society." Helena's voice was brisk, businesslike. "I've prepared a list of suitable candidates. Samuel is 5, almost 6, and already behind where he should be if he's to be taken seriously as James's heir." Rose felt anger spark. "He's not James's heir. James could marry, have legitimate children. James has made it clear he has no intention of marrying anyone but you." The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. "He said that?" Rose asked carefully. "He didn't have to." It's obvious to anyone paying attention, Helena's expression was unreadable. "Which is why I'm asking you directly, Miss Hayes, what are your intentions?" "My intentions? Toward my son, toward this family. Are you planning to stay, or are you simply biding time until you decide we're too much trouble?" Rose met the older woman's eyes. "I'm staying until I'm certain Samuel is safe here, emotionally, psychologically. If I see signs that this life is damaging him, we leave. Otherwise, we'll see." "Not good enough. That boy needs stability, not conditional residence based on your mercurial assessment." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have spent 6 years ensuring he had no connection to this family." It was a low blow, but Rose was tired of dancing around the elephant in every room. Helena's jaw tightened. "I did what I thought was right, and I'm doing the same. The difference is my first priority is Samuel's well-being, not the family reputation." "You think I don't care about his well-being?" "I think you care about it within specific parameters. I don't have those parameters." They stared at each other, two women from different worlds, each trying to protect a child they loved in vastly different ways. Finally, Helena spoke. "I was wrong." Rose blinked. "What?" "6 years ago, I was wrong to intercept those letters. Wrong to assume you were simply an infatuation James would outgrow. Wrong to prioritize alliances over—" She paused, something flickering across her face. "Over the possibility that my son had found something real." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was closer than Rose had ever expected to get. "Why are you telling me this?" Rose asked. "Because that boy deserves better than to be caught between two women who can't find common ground. And because—" Helena's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Because I see the way James looks at you, the way he comes alive when you're in the room, and I'm old enough to recognize that some mistakes, once made, shouldn't be repeated." Rose felt her throat tighten. "I don't know if I can trust this, any of this." "Then don't trust it. Test it. Stay long enough to see if we mean what we say. If James stands by his choices when they cost him. If I can be the grandmother that boy deserves instead of the one my own rigidity created." Helena's eyes met Rose's, and then decide. Before Rose could respond, Samuel burst into the room, James following with an apologetic expression. "Grandmama!" Samuel ran to Helena with the fearless affection of a child who'd been given permission to exist. "Father says we're going to the village fair tomorrow. Can Mama come too?" "Please?" Helena's expression transformed, softened in a way Rose had never seen. "Of course she can. We'll all go. As a family." Samuel beamed, and Rose felt something shift in her chest. Maybe, just maybe. The village fair was chaos and joy in equal measure. Samuel dragged them from booth to booth, watching puppet shows, eating too many sweets, trying his hand at ring toss and failing spectacularly. James bought him a wooden horse that he immediately named Thunder. Helena endured the noise and crowds with surprising grace, even smiling when Samuel convinced her to try candied apples. And Rose let herself simply be present, be happy, be part of something larger than survival. As the sun set and Samuel fell asleep on James's shoulder, They walked back to the carriages through the warm summer evening. "He's getting heavy," Rose observed, as James shifted Samuel's weight. "I don't mind. I've got 6 years of carrying to make up for." They reached the carriage, and James carefully handed Samuel to Rose before helping them both inside. Helena was already settled, dozing lightly in her corner. The carriage ride back was quiet, peaceful. Samuel slept between Rose and James, his small hand clutching his new wooden horse. "Rose," James said softly, so as not to wake the others. "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying, for giving us this chance, for letting me be his father." Rose looked down at their sleeping son, at the peace on his face, at how perfectly he fit in this moment, between both parents, safe and loved. "He needed you," she said quietly. "I couldn't keep denying him that, no matter how scared I was. And what about you? What do you need?" Rose met James's eyes in the dim carriage light. "I need to know this is real, that when the next scandal hits, the next door closes, the next person cuts you, you won't regret this choice." "I won't." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can, because I've lived the alternative. 6 years of the right life, the proper marriage plans, the suitable alliance, the approved path, and I was miserable. Every single day, I was miserable." His voice was fierce. "This, Samuel, you, even the scandal and closed doors, this is real. This is life. And I'll take messy reality over perfect misery any day." Rose felt tears burn. "I want to believe you." "Then do or don't. But either way, I'm here. I'm staying, and I'm going to prove it, day after day, choice after choice, until you have no doubt left." The carriage pulled up to Blackwell Manor. James carried Samuel inside while Rose followed, her mind spinning. Later, after Samuel was tucked into bed and the house had settled into night quiet, Rose stood at her window looking out over the moonlit gardens. A knock came at her door. "Come in." James entered, still dressed from the fair, his hair mussed and his eyes uncertain. "I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep without saying—" He stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Saying what?" "That I love you. Not the memory of you, not the idea of who you were. You, the woman you are now, strong and fierce and willing to face down duchesses and society and me when I'm being an idiot." He took a breath. "And I know you're not ready to hear that, not ready to trust it, but I needed to say it anyway." Rose's hands were shaking. "James, you don't have to say anything back. I'm not asking for declarations. I'm just putting it out there, so you know. So there's no doubt about where I stand." He moved toward the door, giving her the space she'd asked for. "Wait," Rose said. He stopped, turned. Rose crossed to him, her heart pounding. "I'm not ready to say it back. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm willing to try to stay, to see if this impossible thing might actually work." Hope blazed across James's face. "Really, really, for Samuel. And maybe," she took a breath, "time maybe for us too." James reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. "May I kiss you?" he whispered. Rose's answer was to close the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate embraces of 6 years ago. It was careful and questioning and full of possibility. When they pulled apart, Rose was crying. "What's wrong?" James asked, alarmed. "Nothing. Everything. I'm terrified this won't last, that I'm making a mistake, that Samuel will get hurt. Then we'll face it together. All of it. The fear, the mistakes, the hurt. Together." Rose nodded, unable to speak. James kissed her forehead gently. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts our new normal, whatever that looks like." After he left, Rose returned to the window. But this time, instead of uncertainty, she felt something fragile and dangerous blooming in her chest. Hope. 6 months later, Samuel raced through the library, his laughter echoing off the high ceilings. He was taller now, reading fluently, and had lost one front tooth that made his smile endearingly gap-toothed. "Careful," Rose called, as he nearly collided with a side table. "Sorry, Mama. But look, Father's teaching me chess and I almost beat him." "Almost doesn't count," James said, following at a more sedate pace. But his smile was warm, and when his eyes met Rose's, they held promises of later. Helena looked up from her correspondence. "Samuel, young gentlemen, don't run indoors." "Yes, Grandmama. Sorry, Grandmama." But Helena's eyes were soft as she watched him settle at the chessboard. Life at Blackwell Manor had found its rhythm. Not perfect. There were still whispers, still doors that remained closed, Still society matrons who turned up their noses, but there was also laughter, family dinners, Samuel's riding lessons, quiet evenings in the library, and slowly, carefully, Rose and James were rebuilding what had been broken 6 years ago. Not the same. It could never be the same, but something new, something stronger for having been tested. Rose still had moments of fear, still woke some nights certain this would all crumble, but James was always there, solid and steady, proving with actions, not words, that he meant every promise. Rose? James's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You looked far away, just thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was trying to figure out how to pay rent. Now I'm living in a manor house watching our son play chess with his grandmother. Regrets? Rose looked at Samuel, at James, at the life they were slowly, carefully building. No, she said, and meant it. No regrets. James's smile was brilliant. Good, because I was hoping you might consider making this permanent. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Rose's breath caught. James, I know we said we'd take it slow, and we have. 6 months of slow. But Rose, I don't want slow anymore. I want you, officially, completely, as my wife, Samuel's mother, the Duchess of Blackwell. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a single emerald. Marry me, not for Samuel's legitimacy, not to silence gossip, but because I love you and want to spend the rest of my life proving it. Samuel had abandoned chess and was watching with wide eyes. Helena had set down her correspondence, her expression inscrutable. Rose looked at the ring, at James's hopeful face when at the life spread before her. She thought of 6 years of struggle, of intercepted letters and broken promises, of fear and anger and grief. And then she thought of the last 6 months, of James showing up day after day, of Helena softening, of Samuel blossoming, of herself learning to trust again. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Samuel whooped. Helena smiled, actually smiled, and James swept Rose into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I love you, he whispered, and I'm going to spend every day making sure you never regret this. I know, Rose said, and this time she believed it. Samuel crashed into both of them, wrapping his arms around their legs. Does this mean we're a real family now? Rose and James looked at each other, then down at their son. We've always been a real family, Rose said. But yes, sweetheart, now it's official. Good, Samuel pronounced, because I like it here. I like having a father and a grandmother and horses and books and... He stopped, grinning up at them. I like having everything. And watching their son's joy, standing in the library with James's arm around her waist and Helena looking on with quiet approval, Rose realized something profound. She liked having everything too, not the manor or the title or the wealth, though those were nice, but this family, love, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of building a life together. It had taken 6 years, intercepted letters, broken promises, and more pain than she'd thought she could survive, but they were here now, together, and that was worth everything. Shall we tell Mrs. Harper? James asked. She'll want to start planning immediately. She'll probably say she knew all along, Rose said with a laugh. She probably did. They walked toward the door together, Rose, James, and Samuel between them, holding both their hands. And Helena, watching them go, allowed herself a small smile. Some mistakes could be corrected. Some love could survive anything. And sometimes, the most unexpected families were the strongest ones. The future was uncertain. Society would continue to gossip. Challenges would come, but they would face them together, as a family. Finally, truly, completely, a family. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, sharing it with friends, and writing a comment below. Your support means everything to us and keeps us inspired to tell more stories filled with love, resilience, redemption, and second chances. At the end of this video, you'll find another unforgettable romance from our collection. Click and discover where the next story will take you. With all our appreciation, the Empire of Heart Stories team